everyone. Welcome. Can you hear me well? Yes. Perfect. I'm going to start with the trailer, and after that, I will introduce Audrey. Let's look at the trailer.
Democracy is on a decline.
Authoritarianism is on the rise.
Global freedom has eroded for the 18th consecutive year. Audrey, Tang, what is your greatest hope for democracy across the globe?
That people see democracy as a social technology, something that people can construct together, that they can improve in the here and now. We can code up political systems.
The Sunflower Movement was a real turning point for Taiwan's democracy.
When the Sunflower Movement happened, I said to my colleague, I have to leave now, democracy needs me. I brought a very long cable for internet connection. I live streamed through Twitter. Everybody saw it is possible for democracy to evolve, to come up with novel policies simply by asking the people, what should we do together? I was born with a heart defect, and one day I just fainted. I woke up in a hospital, and they told me the hole in my heart has grown. I could die. This awareness that everything can be reset tomorrow reminds me of Taiwanese democracy. We can't lose our democracy just with a couple missiles.
I think there's a lot that the world can learn from Taiwan. The US is running on a 250-year-old operating system. There is a strong desire to move beyond this and properly rethink from first principles. What would democracy in the 21st century actually look like?
We can make the government more open to the public. It'll be easier for people to access the data, to analyze it, transparency.
Audrey has created the opportunity to make Taiwan the most exciting constitutional democracy in the world.
I think it's a very critical moment. China really wants to invade Taiwan.
中国统一是历史的必然。
You're sitting on a place that is the flashpoint if there's going to be World War III. And yet there's calm in the eye of the hurricane. And that calm, I think, emanates from all that Audrey's done.
We can become co-creators of our democratic system, reconfiguring society in a way that is more transparent, more inclusive, more fair.
Hello everyone, my name is Yuji. I'm a graduate student of liberal studies, and as an extension of the course Science, Technology, Ethics, and Leadership taught by Professor Sars, who's also here today, we have the honor to invite Audrey to come to Duke with us. So it is, before we start getting to the event, I want to acknowledge Professor Sars and a few organizations, including Graduate Professional Student Government, Graduate Liberal Studies, and Science Society for sponsoring the event and making this happen. And it is such an honor to have Audrey here with us today. She was the first digital minister of Taiwan from 2016 to 2024, and since then she has become the cyber ambassador, and she has been a global leader in digital democracy as recognized by Time magazine, the 100 most influential people in AI. And she has begun a world tour around the world, and as she shared with me yesterday, that she has to change time zone every 4 days. So that just shows her impact and contribution. And she has been around advocating for digital democracy, for radical transparency, civic innovation, all those core concepts that we will soon hear from today. So for the first session of the presentation, Audrey will share her insights on how technology can be designed to strengthen democracy. And for the later half, we will open the floor for questions, so please have those prepared. And now a round of applause for Audrey.
Thank you. Really happy, honored to be here. And we just had another conversation around AI, and this one is going to be more about the policy and politics around AI governance. So at any given point, please feel free to raise your hand and interrupt me, and we can get into a conversation directly. The main thesis I want to discuss for this talk is that democracy is itself a kind of social technology that gets better the more people invest our time to upgrade it. And in Taiwan, in the past decade, we have moved from the only 9% of approval rate back in 2014 to, by 2020, already more than 70% of approval rate because that we choose to trust people radically. Now, in 2014, President Ma Ying-jeou, as I mentioned, was enjoying 9% of approval rates in a country of 24 million people. That means that anything he says, 20 million people are very skeptical about it. And the reason why was not that President Ma Ying-jeou did do something that's really, really wrong, but rather people's expectation has been changed by the rise of social media. People suddenly found that they can find people of very different backgrounds, ethnicities, religions, and so on, but with shared values and organize online. And the government, on the other hand, could not respond with the same speed, and therefore seemed to be very far from the people, by the people that are already organized this way. And so it came to a head in 2014 March, when the parliament at the time tries to convince that the citizenry of Taiwan that it's completely safe to sign a trade deal with Beijing that would have opened our 4G infrastructure to Huawei and ZTE and our publishing industry, our information publishing industry and so on, to the likes of ByteDance and TikTok. And the people in Taiwan entertain these ideas in a way that is really democratic, in that we not just bring the conversation online, but also bring it offline as well. In fact, as you have seen in the trailer, we had a demonstration where 500,000 people went on the street and actually occupied the parliament thoroughly, non-violently, for 3 weeks. And during the 3 weeks, unlike other places where people are just protesting against something, we always say we were demonstrating, showing something that is possible, some new alternative and upgrade to democracy. So with more than 20 different civil society organizations, each in a different corner of the occupied parliament, we deliberate on each and every aspect of the trade deal. So you can come with your company name, with your civil society organization's name. We develop tools that let you look up exactly how does the trade deal affect you. You can talk about the labor part, the consumer protection part, and so on and so forth. And every day we read the uncommon ground, the unlikely common ground that was discovered by those 20 different citizen assembly sites. And then these are like the plenary. And then we also read what are the remaining issues to be resolved the next day. So after 3 weeks, we became the only occupied that I know of around the world. Thank you, Siri. Yeah, the co-pilot that provided this tech-assisted co-pilot of citizens' assemblies such that it converged rather than diverged, which was the fate of pretty much every other occupier in the world. And the speaker, Wang Jinping, at the time of the parliament simply said, okay, the crowdsourced version is actually better than the parliamentarians' version, so let's adopt it, and so you can go home. So it was a very successful Occupy. And so this shared peak experience instilled in people this hope that we can apply this method as citizen assembly, like a jury, but for policy design, for other stuff as well. At the end of that year, all the mayors that supported this way of open government citizen participation got elected, sometimes even surprising to themselves. And all the mayoral candidates that did not support this kind of policy making simply lost the election. So at the end of 2014, we, the civic activists supporting this demonstration, was tapped as reverse mentor, people younger than 35, to advise the cabinet ministers in the art of public participation. And so core to our design is what's called bridging systems. In 2015, we implemented this system to deliberate about a first-generation AI, the Uber dispatching artificial intelligence algorithm. It's like a recommendation algorithm. And what we have done, instead of just polling people about whether you like sharing economy or you like gig economy, we don't ask abstract questions. We just ask, how do you feel about someone with no professional driver license picking up strangers on their way to work and charging them for it, basically. And people share very different feelings. And once you get into the system, you can see a feeling shared by your fellow citizen. You can agree or disagree. As you do, your avatar moves toward people who share similar sentiments as you through K-means clustering. So it's a kind of artificial intelligence, but I call it assistive intelligence. It's like an eyeglass or a group selfie that lets you see what people around you feel, and also, most importantly, what are the common sentiment that unites different clusters, even though that they disagree on everything else. They all agree, for example, that undercutting existing meters are bad and surge pricing may be fine, for example. So after, again, 3 weeks of conversation, we ended up with the same set of coherent solutions as we did in the physical Occupy. And then the ministries of economy, of transportation, of finance basically say, yeah, this version, the crowdsourced version, is better than our expert version. So let's check with stakeholders whether they can accept that, and they did. And so we have a good Diversified Taxi Act that was crowdsourced as well back in 2015. And so this kind of system has then influenced community notes. So today, whether you're using x.com, previously Twitter, or whether you're using YouTube or Facebook here in the US, sometimes you see that a post goes viral with no context that is very easy to be misread. And then sometimes you see a note from the community attached to that popular post. And that's the same algorithm as we designed back in 2015 for the bridging systems. Community notes ask people to upvote and downvote each note when it comes to helpfulness. And it shows that people, that the kind of left wing and the right wing of the system, and then only the up wing, that is to say the notes considered helpful, but both the left wing and the right wing gets showed up in community notes. And so this notion of bridging systems heals the antisocial corners of social media back to a more pro-social corner of social media. So that is what we call the uncommon ground. And nowadays, we're now seeing in Taiwan, by systematically applying those uncommon ground discovery since 2015 all the way to 2020, we've held hundreds and hundreds of consultations, of deliberations, of citizen assemblies, such that whenever people feel that there is something that is tearing apart our nation, for example, marriage equality, or there was one very popular petition, 8,000 people strong, that says we should change our time zone to +9, the same as Japan, just so that people flying in from Shanghai or Beijing will have to change their clock. And then there's another 8,000 strong that says you should remain in time zone +8, because it will be very costly to the stock exchange, to many other stuff as well. And of course, we did not agree to change our time zone to +8.5, which will fail everybody. But instead, we used this method to find the uncommon ground between the two camps. They both want Taiwan to be seen as more unique in the world. They just disagree on the cost. So we brainstorm on if we're ready to spend this much money, we have quantified it, and what are the better ways to make Taiwan seen as more unique. So we brainstormed, for example, running RightsCon, the human rights conference in Taiwan. We brainstormed on offering gold cards for people to contribute to open source and to public good, to offer them Taiwanese residency with healthcare and so on and so forth. And then it made all 16,000 people more happy. And this kind of civic infrastructure, civic muscle that we perfected over the course of 6 years since 2015 really paid dividends in 2020. So 2020, if some of you remember, there was this virus, the coronavirus, COVID-19. And early on in 2020, there was a polarization that we have seen in Taiwan and also other places around the world. One part of our country was saying, because of our SARS experience, only N95, the highest grade of masks, are going to be useful against COVID-19. And all the other masks are placebo, they're not useful. The other side was saying, oh, it's ventilation, it's aerosol, so any kind of mask would hurt you, and N95 will hurt you the most. And so it has the potential of really polarizing our society. And again, applying the same method of finding uncommon ground, we immediately pushed, 24 hours after we detected this polarization, a public service announcement featuring a very cute Shiba Inu, the Doge dog, and the dog putting her paw on her mouth, saying, wear a mask to remind each other to keep your dirty, unwashed hand from your face. So what it did is that it depolarized the society by reassociating mask into a hand washing reminder. So if you don't wear a mask and somebody else does, they're just reminding to wash your hands, right? They're nothing special. And we did measure tap water usage, which did increase after that. And measures such as this made sure that we don't suffer from the fatigue when it comes to the authoritarian methods of control, of censorship, of takedowns, and so on. So the upshot is that in the 3 years of pandemic, Taiwan never for a day implemented any citywide lockdown. And we also reported, I think, more than 12% of economic growth over the 3 years because TSMC just keeps churning out chips during the 3 years. And we also made sure that we pre-bunk all sort of this potentially polarization using what we call humor over rumor, or the fast, fair, fun model of pre-bunking. Another pandemic-related example was around vaccination. Early on, when AstraZeneca became available, many senior people was very afraid because they saw reports from Europe that it introduced blood clots or something like that when it comes to adverse side effects. But then instead of polarizing society with vax and anti-vax, we published a scoreboard of each age bracket in each different district and their aggregated preference of each brand of vaccines. So there's people who would never get AstraZeneca, but they would get BNT Pfizer because TSMC paid for it. It's a TSMC blessed vaccination. There's people who believe in the local homebrew, the Medigen, and will only get Medigen. But there's also people who swear Medigen is toxic and they will only get Moderna, and so on and so forth. I got all 4 brands just to make a point. But anyway, the point being that we turned what could have been a vax versus anti-vax energy into a my football team is better than your football team energy, a friendly competition. So everybody got vaccinated. And so the point here, again, is to pre-bunk rather than debunk after the fact by discovering the uncommon ground and applying it. And so what we're seeing over the past decade is that gradually, especially young people, they move from a vertical trust in institutions. Previously, before this advent of social media, people believed something just because the head of the university says it, or the minister says it, or some of those vertical institutions express it because it's reputed journalist says it, or so on and so forth. But now, a decade after the advent of the For You personalized feeds of social media, people pay much more attention to the same cohort of people who would have the comments on the same page. People actually take more attention and actually trust more on the comment page than the actual byline, so on and so forth. And so, I mean, this is entirely natural. This is just how the communication infrastructure has been shaped. But then it also means that the shape of trust has changed as well. Instead of vertical trust, where one person up high broadcasts to millions of people, nowadays, to win back trust, you have to trust each other. You have to trust your peers. You have to trust the citizens. By giving trust, then you can get trust. So that is the horizontal mode of trust, what we call broad listening instead of broadcasting. And so in Taiwan, we have been, as I mentioned, implementing the reverse mentorship system. We want to make sure that it is the 15 years old, 16, 17 years old leading the agenda setting of our society. Each and every cabinet minister since 2014 worked with people younger than 35 to advise them on the national direction. So when I was 33, I was the reverse mentor to Minister Jacqueline Tsai in charge of national participation. And then I became that minister. When I turned 35, I became too old, so I need my own young mentors. And so by implementing very systematically this idea, we saw in 2022, according to ICCS, the International Civics and Citizenship Study, our 15-year-olds are now top of the world when it comes to civic knowledge, to the civic muscle, because it's the Pygmalion effect. If you trust the 15, 16, 17 years old to set the national direction and share with them their responsibility, they rise up to the occasion and actually become the next generation leaders. So we switched our curriculum entirely around this idea. Instead of media literacy, which again is a vertical kind of trust, right? You have gatekeepers broadcasting, and then you have people with media literacy literacy, critical thinking on the recipient's end. We flip it around and taught instead media competency, which means that you can then co-create the fact-checking journey yourself. It is not the individually checked facts that inoculates young people. It is the journey of going through thinking like a journalist that builds, again, the civic muscle that guards against the polarization, the outrage, and so on. And so the young people, my reverse mentors, younger than 35, advised me that maybe it is time to bring this entire citizen assembly sortition, like a jury system, to the online world. So we had a good chance last year. Last March, maybe some of you remember, had a lot of scams on advertisement on social media. It's the beginning of the deepfake situation. Some people call it dead internet theory. The idea is that there's no living person on the internet anymore. It's all bots because you cannot tell a bot from a human for the first time starting last year. And so in Taiwan, for example, whether it's on Facebook or on YouTube, you see a lot of advertisement featuring very famous Taiwanese like Jensen Huang of NVIDIA trying to sell you some crypto or some stocks. And if you click it, Jensen actually talks to you very convincingly. Of course, it's all deepfake. Previously, it had like 6 fingers or something, but very quickly, you cannot tell the difference anymore. And so we asked people of Taiwan, because we're the most free in the entire Asia when it comes to online freedom. So we don't want the government to censor any content. We're basically absolutely no when it comes to any kind of censorship. So if you cannot censor advertisements, but you have to counter against those deepfake bots, what to do? We don't know, right? So we sent SMS text message from 111, the trusted number, to 200,000 random addresses, random phone numbers around Taiwan, asking just one simple question again: how do you feel about online fraud and what to do with it? And so they gave us many good ideas. And then we also asked, would you like to spend some time on jury duty? We'll pay you for your time on a kind of 6 hours deliberation online, and you'll be paired with 9 other people randomly assigned and facilitated by an AI, and thousands of people sign up. And so we chose 450 people representative of the Taiwanese demographics, and then we started the deliberation online. Again, they arrived on the uncommon ground, entirely facilitated just by a chat room built by Stanford University. One room maybe said, for example, that instead of assuming an advertisement is real until it's flagged as scam, we should assume everything is a scam unless Jensen Huang signs off on it with his digital signature. So that's the flipping of the default. The other room may be saying, you don't fine Facebook if they violate this, you just assign the same liability. So if Facebook does not implement KYC and somebody gets scammed out of $3 million, then Facebook should be liable for that $3 million. Another room says, but ByteDance, TikTok do not have a Taiwanese representative office. So even if you assign liability, they can just ignore us what to do. And people say, oh, you should slow down connection to their servers gradually until all their business goes to Google or something. And none of this are censorship. None of this touch the content layer. And so they're considered as proportionate. And we can show, regardless of their ethnicity, their occupation, place they live, gender, age brackets, more than 85% of Taiwanese people agree with these measures at the end of the half-a-day deliberation. And then that was last March. By April, we checked with the big tech. By May, we pushed out the legislation to the parliament. By June, the digital signature amendment passed, and by July, everything has been ratified. So this year, if you open Facebook or YouTube in Taiwan, you simply don't see those fraudulent advertisements anymore. And so this is the power of citizen assemblies. You do not need 2 faces, one to discover the problem and one to poll people, what can you agree with? Nowadays with AI, especially with language models, you can discover the uncommon ground in real time and then close the loop by informing people it's because of these words you said or you typed that we implement this kind of countermeasures in a way that hopefully is on the uncommon ground. And then we're also applying this same idea to social media. We call it pro-social media. And pro-social media basically is the idea that the community notes, far from just being the note attached to viral posts, which is more like debunking rather than pre-bunking, we can sort the recommendation feed in a way that, again, uncovers the uncommon ground. And so we're now working with Blue Sky to design a new recommendation engine so that people can see that the popular feeds on this co-curated feed, instead of strip mining the social fabric, so each of us see a very different feed from each other, it is about creating a common experience, almost like Super Bowl advertisements or something, that you know that are bringing together two different communities that may be disagreeing on everything else, but on this particular cultural or scientific or educational content, these can be the bridge that brings those two different communities together. And this has been more or less how LinkedIn has been operating, is on aligning the incentive of the subscribers versus the recommendation feeds. And then I think Blue Sky in particular, I'm very excited because it offers what's called permissionless innovation. You don't have to get permission from JGrabber. You can just get the same atmosphere, the ad protocol that Blue Sky is based on, and already people are building Skylight, which is a TikTok clone that runs on Blue Sky. And so I'm also advising the People's Bid, so that's a few people like Frank McCord, Kevin O'Leary, and so on, trying to get the US version of TikTok and then turning it into something like Blue Sky, something is open, so that if you post on TikTok, you can consume it on Blue Sky, on Instagram, on YouTube, and so on and so forth, so people get freedom of movement for the first time across the social media, just as you can take your telephone number from one telecom provider to the other, or how ATMs do functions, even if you withdraw from a different banks and so on. We're bringing the same portability to social media to make it much more pro-social. And when it comes to AI governance, then one of the main questions that we have in this decentralized pro-social media is that then there will be a lot of people implementing their own sorting algorithm and storing their own content and so on. But what about the content that are simply illegal? For example, CSAM, child sexual abuse material, NCII, non-consensual intimate images, and things like that. Previously, in centralized social media, the governance is easy. Everybody just subscribe to Microsoft Photo DNA that scans each and every uploaded picture. But now, because of CSAM, synthetic CSAM at least, is a decentralized phenomenon. The criminals can make such images and videos without the internet connection. So the old way became simply untenable. So in the Paris AI Summit, again, me representing Project Liberty and working with Blue Sky, Roblox, Discord, and many other this kind of medium-sized communities, we announced Roost, the robust open online safety tools. What it means is that instead of subscribing to one centralized Microsoft Photo DNA, each and every operator can run a decentralized system that scans each incoming message but keep it entirely locally. And then we can, using what's called federated learning, train these kind of things together, filter together, without compromising on privacy and so on, using, again, AI to map images or videos and so on into its corresponding text, which is legal to hold on to and much easier to handle and much less likely to re-identify somebody. So this basically resolved the tension in the AI community. A year and a half ago in the Bletchley Park Summit, the safety or security side and the openness side were really at odds with each other. And so by charting this uncommon ground between the security community and the openness community, we then show that actually there are uncommon ground where there's a non-dual use. For example, this Roost tools, the grounds that both sides can invest in, and by increasing openness and diffusion of capabilities, we actually increase safety instead of removing safety. Think of it like if there's a way to mass manufacture N95 masks using just ordinary closest material, and we distribute it around the world, it does not increase biosafety risks, but it defends against all sorts of biorisk caused by advanced AI. So by applying the same non-dual use filter, we can then get much more improvement in online openness and safety. And this is what we call plurality, technology to foster the pluralism and also seeing the conflict that's out of pluralism, not as fire to be put out, but rather energy sources that you can channel into an engine for co-creation. So whether it is between, as I mentioned, openness or safety, on one side, or during the pandemic, privacy and public health on the other, and so on and so forth. You can turn each of those binary polarization into co-creation if you have an engine that can channel these conflicts into co-creation, into a systemic discovery of the uncommon ground. So that's plurality, and feel free to learn more at plurality.net. And this is my initial remark. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Audrey's very inspiring talk and bringing in so many examples from Taiwan. And so now we will open the floor for questions. Please raise your hand and let us know your name and your interest. So if anyone has a question.
Hi Audrey, thank you so much for the talk. I'm Michelle, I'm a senior here, and then I'm going to be doing my PhD this next fall in this space, AI democracy. My question is on the pro-social aspect. You mentioned that you're moving to Blue Sky, that you're conducting all these initiatives through Blue Sky. A concern I've seen, as I've seen academics, I unfortunately am on Twitter a decent amount, but as I see academics move towards Blue Sky because there's this kind of like pushback against Twitter and the radicality behind it, there's a concern that now Blue Sky is almost its own echo chamber of kind of like high intellectuals and of like one certain kind of viewpoint. So do you have any thoughts on that in terms of like having Blue Sky be the deployment space? Because there is an argument to be made that like potentially other less maybe healthy platforms, but more diverse in terms of like radical viewpoints might be a more interesting way of trying to bridge people together?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually went on a live stream show to talk with Laura Loomer on Loomer Unleashed for this particular issue for 60 minutes with 60,000 live stream viewers on not just X, but also rumble.com. And for that conversation, I also, for the first time, had good conversations on Truth Social, on Popular, on Gov, and also on Bishop. And so there are, of course, different spaces online. For every Blue Sky, there is one Truth Social. Both are free software though, and both are much more open when it comes to the access to firehose, to the underlying programming, and so on, compared to X.com, which is the most opaque of them all at this point. And so instead of saying that, okay, these are echo chambers, we can instead think about how to bridge them together. So my Threads.net, which is the meta implementation of the Fediverse account, and my Mastodon account in GovZero, that's social, and my Blue Sky account, and so on, they can actually be different aspects of me, but then with the same protocol, you can also string them together so that it delivers what's called surprising validators. So this is getting trendy on Blue Sky, and maybe our algorithm, the bridging algorithm, can discover that this is a surprising validator for these conversations in Truth Social, and then deliver that through the bridge to those Truth Social folks, and vice versa. So instead of thinking that everybody must be in the same room, which simply doesn't work, we can actually work on like the interbank protocol. And we already, through the Project Liberty Institute, have got the state of Utah passed what's called the Digital Choice Act just a few weeks ago. So starting next year, anyone, a citizen of Utah, when they move from, say, Truth Social to Blue Sky, or from TikTok to Instagram and so on, instead of losing the access of their content and their social graph, the law basically says the social network needs to adopt like the ad protocol or the Fediverse activity pod protocol, decentralized social media protocols, in order to facilitate this freedom of movement so that people are no longer trapped into the product trap that is TikTok. If you post on TikTok and I don't want to view it on TikTok, TikTok cannot stop me from viewing it on Blue Sky or on other places. So this is kind of a bedrock that we're now building upon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was really inspired to hear about the idea of debunking and fast, fair, and fun. I was just... Oh, sorry. My name is Gabriel. I'm a student here doing public policy. I do technology policy. My background's in philosophy, religion, and computer science, so a lot of the stuff you're talking about rings very true and close to my heart. So I'm wondering where some of this language came from, or is this something that you're also co-creating as part of this process of GovZero or other experiences you've had? An alternative question is, if democracy is a social technology, it seems like we're swimming in technical and ethical met. I'm wondering, what are some of the things that you see as like low-hanging fruit that we should be thinking about, whether we're in academia or whether we're technologists or kind of like in whatever role you feel like there are low-hanging fruit. What do you think is most important we look at right now?
That's a great question. The reason why I work both on the AI governance space and the social media space is I think social media recommendation algorithms are the first instance of a misaligned AI. So instead of saying, you know, in the future there will be this AI risk, this AI harm, bio, cyber info, and so on, we can simply tame social media because many people understand social media before 2015 as a completely different beast compared to the last decade, which was like a bad dream for 10 years. And the inflection point, so to speak, was in 2015 when many platforms switched their algorithm from what used to foster social connections to what's called engagement through enrichment metrics, where people are only measuring one thing, which is how much you're addicted as a drug user, on these platforms on your touch screens. And so then became, you know, the autoplay, the short form videos, the For You feed as default, and so on and so forth. And all the platforms that did not adapt simply kind of withered, and then all the major platforms kind of made this change to raise to the bottom of the brainstem. This is now very well understood. And because it's well understood with like the anxious generation and things like that, I think that's really the low-hanging fruit. And now we're seeing the lawmakers across both parties here in the US, whether it's using the antitrust lens or the kids protection lens or really any other lens, they're all very much willing to move past this arbitrary caricature of peak polarization caused entirely by this For You feed. And so I think that is the low-hanging fruit we can work on, and based on the sheer peak experience, we can then work on online trust and safety and many other places, counter fraud and so on as well.
Thank you.
I see a showing hand in the back.
Thank you. My name is Mentorship. I'm a sophomore here, international, and I study computer science. I have a background in philosophy and ethics. And thank you for the presentation. You mentioned the aspect of democracy as people's engagements with social media and tech companies, but I'm also interested in democracy within tech companies. Is that something that we can do any steps to improve? Because if you think about it, maybe over the last century, nations have become very powerful, they became empires, and we saw the need for democracy within nations in how they need to have checks and balances and engage more than just one authoritarian person at the top. But when I look at CEOs of big tech companies today, it seems to me that it's the same problem. One person having an authoritarian power influencing billions of people. So I wonder if there's any transition being prepared soon, or any effort in that direction to give less power to the tech company CEOs and make tech companies more democratic in the way they function. Because I know so many Facebook employees disagree with how the company works, and those that voice their disagreement often just get fired.
Exactly. And that happens in a captured market with what's called a product market trap. A couple years ago, there was a study that shows an average US undergrad using TikTok. If you want them to stop use TikTok, you have to pay them almost $60 a month. They lose that much utility. They're kind of trapped through FOMO into the system. On the other hand, if there's a magic button that they can press to move everybody around them together off TikTok, they're willing to pay you $30 a month for that to happen. And so imagine that, right? So like Facebook, if everybody lose utility staying in the system, but because of the gravity of network effect, of addiction and peer pressure and so on and so forth, the first person to move out lose even more utility, so nobody would migrate unless everybody migrates in a large wave. And so to make this migration easier, I think is an important check and balance. And this is why, like the Digital Choice Act or the Fediverse and so on is so important. If the government can step in and say, we're not trying to regulate how speech is made, but if you have a different take on how speech recommendation engine should work, you should not be punished by de facto excommunication with all your friends and families just because you want to try a different configuration. Like when I was a child in Taiwan, the ATM only withdrawed cash from the same bank. And so if you switch to a newer bank, that newer bank does not have the placements of the ATMs. And so they cannot compete with the older established banks. And that's not democratic at all. So we analyzed democracy in the terms of voice, choice, and stake. And the stake part, I think, is really the fundamental part. If you do not have good, credible exit in the economic competition, then there's no pressure for the voice part, for the companies to offer meaningful participation to the people. And then you don't get, for example, cooperatives or the data coalitions, data trusts, those alternate way to run a company like Proton or Wikipedia or Signal and so on. All these alternative systems or open systems, participatory systems, can only benefit if the migration cost is low or guaranteed by the government as zero, so that you can migrate to those more participatory systems. So there is a step, like maybe you need to tackle the stake issue first before the choice issue, and then the choice of the issue is tackled, and then you get real voice, because there's a race to the top instead to the bottom when it comes to the stake part and the choice part.
Hi, I'm Molly. I'm in the bioethics program. I have a background in statistics and machine learning and just also social sciences. And I was wondering, I love the idea of finding on common ground, but I worry about just even within most democracies, there are minoritized voices and people whose voices aren't heard to the same degree as more privileged people. And I worry that maybe with finding on common ground, those clusters won't be as big or not as amplified. Like, how have you worked to just consider the needs of disadvantaged people more?
Yeah, the algorithm of Polis specifically is designed to address this issue. So first, it used k-means clustering. So the area you see on the screen represent the plurality of the voices, but not the head count. So if you get like 10,000 people all voting exactly the same way, like clones, then they're condensed to a single dot in the principal component analysis map. And so what this means is that it never pays to mobilize people who are exactly of the same voice as yourself. And it always pays to bridge into the minorities, because the minorities kind of in a high dimensional space is very far from everybody else. But we say that you need to bridge across this long a distance to get even the minority groups 85% approval rate in order to be even considered by our pre-commitment. And so, well, visualization is hard to do without actual visuals. But if you can check out the visualization at what could BGB, what could Bowling Green be, then it's much more clear how that works. Maybe we can open up the what could BGB. So it's doing something. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is a real example using Polis in Kentucky in Bowling Green, and as you can see, it looks like this. And almost 8,000 people have more than 1 million interactions, and there's a lot of highlights as well. But so these are the highlights. They're machine generated and grounded by a language model to the uncommon ground that was discovered there. But the point here is that even in the potentially polarized topics, for example, community identity, Southern hospitality, values, collaboration, inclusivity, community pride, image, and so on. Again, it doesn't pay if you ignore the minorities, because then you will just fall into the 50-50 split. With one majority and a minority group, it's still considered 50-50 split, because it's considered on a unit of communities, not individuals. And people do see, actually, once there's a race to the top dynamic, people compete to propose much more nuance, much more bridging ideas as opposed to the polarized one. So it's not about censoring away polarized voices. It is about changing how the visualization and how the ranking is done, so that the more distance you carry through this bridge, the more prominent your statements become, and that has a Pygmalion effect. People rise to the occasion because then people are expected to create longer and longer bridges. It's hard to describe this in a linear language, and so feel free to just play with the polis visualizations.
Cool, thank you so much.
I have a question myself. Sure. So of the examples you have brought up earlier about demonstration 2014 and the Uber example, those are the time that AI hasn't existed. So from your observation, you also brought in a few examples, but from your observation, what has AI enabled and how do you see that evolving?
Yes, so the Citizen Assembly online, the Alignment Assembly was last year, so that's after generative AI. And there's two things generative AI can bring. One is just this automatic topicalization was simply not possible. With millions and millions of inputs, it used to take moderators a huge amount of time to detect the overlaps and to find like mutually exclusive and comprehensive, collectively comprehensive way to present this. But now it can be done in just minutes using the open source SenseMaker technology that is based on a language model. The other one is about closing the loop. So Bowling Green offers what's called committed listeners. So these are the local museums, curators, the waterfront, the factory, and so on and so forth. And so each site would receive personalized kind of summary of what pertains to their purview, to their mandate. And once they reply, they can then reach back to the people who agreed on those ideas that goes into the summary. So it's almost like, you know, Shapley values, influence functions that then can close the loop and show people exactly because of these words you typed or these ideas you shared, these few seconds you said on the record, we implement this change because of you. And previously it was not possible to go back individually to citizens this way. You can at most offer a summary report, but now you can close the loop and deliver a much more personalized listening experience. And then it's like a flywheel that then can get people to offer more sharing in their local communities, arm them with more kits to have their own local conversations. So if you're interested, there's a new position paper that I co-wrote with Larry Lessig and Deb Roy of Harvard and MIT called Conversation Networks that talks about this new dynamic enabled by generative AI.
Thank you.
Hi Audrey, thank you for your inspiring talk. I'm a PhD student from National Tsinghua University in Taiwan, and now I'm currently a visiting student here. Many Taiwanese people recently they are trying to get their Ghibli style photos generated by ChatGPT, and
it's not just Taiwan, everybody.
Yeah, everybody.
Studio Ghibli, yes.
Yeah, and I was quite surprised because some of my really low-profile friends, they started to post photos of themselves. After the Ghiblized style photos, and I was quite surprised because okay, they are starting to update their social media because they are very low profile before. So after hearing your talk, I'm wondering how or what would you do to encourage those potential users in joining social media and promote this idea of pro-social media. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the Studio Ghibli style went viral partly because it's quite pro-social. Like anything that is potentially polarizing, when it's drawn in the style of Studio Ghibli, suddenly it seems very wholesome. And people get into a much more pro-social mood. So to me, that is also a backlash against the online polarization. And people really would do anything to feel much more wholesome and holistic and things like that online. So yeah, I think design absolutely matters, which is why the Bowling Green design, I really like how the report is designed, because it conveys a warmth in the participation and in a way that just pure numbers simply cannot. So I think in the future, we can also see, just like vibe coding, you can think about vibe ranking. So for context, vibe coding is when you don't need to get into the programming language. You just need to say, I want to see this kind of application, and you just describe it in a kind of vibe feeling-ish way to the AI, and the AI does the coding for you. That's called vibe coding. And so nowadays you can also imagine, like in one of the prototypes we're building for Blue Sky, you can just talk to your feed and say that, oh, I want to see more Ghibli, or I want to see more wholesome feed. I want to bring these two communities together, and then it just automatically re-ranks and show you a different feed with a different vibe, right? So when offered this kind of extremely democratized tool for people, our hypothesis is most people will opt for prosociality instead of anti-sociality. They kind of was trapped in this bottom brainstem only because the default was really bad. But if it's very easy to change the default, literally just talk to your phone, then many more people would prefer that. At least that's our hypothesis, is now being prototyped, and we'll see how it goes in a couple months from now. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ichan, and I'm also from Taiwan. I have a question about the recent news about deporting like Chinese wives or like spouses that does not have their like Taiwanese citizenship yet. So, so these spouses, they had like posts on like the Chinese TikTok about trying to take over Taiwan like by force, and I wonder what your opinion is on that, like if that constitutes as like their freedom of speech, and also your opinion on how that could be compared to like students in Colombia that maybe have voiced their support for Palestine and get deported, and do you see that as like the same issue or different, or any opinion you have on that?
I'm not exactly sure the parallel here. I mean, the U.S. isn't part of Israel, so what you're comparing is essentially one advocating for the forceful annexation of the ROC territory, that's to say Taiwan, Penghu, and Matsu, by the PLA, and the other part probably isn't saying Palestine should annex the U.S. So I'm honestly curious about the parallel.
Well, I'd say the parallel is probably they had like some record online about voicing support for either of the two, but like do you see, so you don't think there's a parallel? And
well, because the law that's used on both cases are completely different, right? So this law is more about advocating for an adversary to take over the ROC constitutional order. And as far as I understand, for this side, it's not invoking the same law. So the legal basis is not the same. In the Taiwan case, I also agree that the law could be more clear. Currently, it's based on a very contested interpretation of the so-called 两岸人民关系条例 of the Cross-Strait Act that leaves a lot to interpretation. And so I'm with the legislators that think that we need to spell out the exact parameters in the law so that people understand what constitutes as advocating for foreign annexation, what constitutes as free speech, instead of just leaving each case by case for interpretation by the ministries.
Just like a follow-up, so do you think, like currently the law they have, or in Taiwan they have, is it violating like freedom of speech, and is it also the case for that in like America for like non-citizens or like people on like a student visa?
Sorry, I didn't get the last part.
So like, do you think both these, do you think these two cases like violate the freedom of speech for either like people who does not have like permanent residency, or actually some of them do, but like they don't have citizenship in either country? And
also, even for citizens, I think there are also liabilities when it comes to so-called freedom of speech. Of course, I'm against censorship, right? So you should not just shadow ban someone or to deprive them of speech. But if they offer some speech that causes immediate harm or a great harm, and especially if it's done in a way that is for commercial interest, as was the case actually for some of the case that you just mentioned in Taiwan, then like nobody, there's no pro-fraud party in Taiwan. So nobody like honestly say, you know, the fraudsters have the freedom of speech to impersonate Jensen Huang just because Jensen Huang is a public figure to sell Bitcoin. There's like literally nobody arguing that is freedom of speech. I think what could be confusing is that on the social media platforms, because it's the same amplification algorithm, you get people who get a lot of commercial speech and then propped up because of their commercial investment, advertisement, and so on. And suddenly they start doing political speech. And then they say, oh, because of First Amendment, we're protected because this is policy speech. But at the end of the day, they're reusing the commercial speech engine, right? So I think there's a good conversation here to be had. Maybe Section 230, if it's commercial speech that amplifies harm by the platforms, maybe according to some, I think, state-level judges, that should be construed as first-party speech by the platform themselves because they're amplifying that content. Or according to some other scholars, the policy speech and the commercial speech simply should not use the same recommendation engine. That is also one way to kind of separate the two. So I mean, the design space here is very large, and I think it will serve everybody well if the law pertaining these spell them out instead of just conflating them into a single like freedom of speech issue. For me, there's at least the freedom of speech, the freedom of reach, and also liability issues that need to be separately figured out.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Paolo, and I'm not from Taiwan. My question is kind of a follow-up on what Molly was asking earlier about you know, ensuring engagement, like broad engagement in these systems. So I find all the things you talked about really appealing, but I find myself thinking about, you know, it's very connected to people who are online a lot, who have digital devices in their hands all the time, who are comfortable with responding to text message surveys or using an app or engaging in social media. And I'm thinking about, for example, older people who do not use cell phones, cannot use cell phones, or people who are, you know, for financial reasons or time reasons cannot engage in that way. And for example, you know, here in local politics, which is nominally very democratic, I can show up to a city council meeting and argue my case, but in practice, the kind of people who show up to city council meetings are people who are retired, usually wealthy, and have the time and energy to go and show up on a Tuesday night in a city council meeting, and someone who has children to take care of, or elderly parents to take care of, or doesn't have a car, or is working 2 jobs, they are effectively not included in that democratic process because they just don't have the time or energy or resources to show up and participate in it. And so I'm wondering how these kinds of systems that you talk about will address that to ensure that people who aren't online a lot, you know, make sure they don't get left out.
Yeah, that's a great question. So instead of scaling out, usually taken to mean that one conversation gets millions and millions of people talking to each other, we talk about scaling across, saying that maybe you have an in-person conversation here, and as long as one of the persons participating in it have a phone, then you can take what's resonating in that conversation, because AI is now getting very good in what's called meronymity, preserving the partial anonymity, meaning that you do not need to go back to re-identify each and every person, but you know, for example, these are 5 different people speaking, and here are the places where they resonated with each other. So I'm working with the Center of Constructive Communication in MIT. They have a tool called Cortico that can take one of those conversations and play the resonating parts in the follow-on conversation, which could be online or in person, and then kind of just cross-pollinate across many different conversations, and then automatically make a medley that after you listen through this medley, you kind of get a holistic understanding of where everybody is feeling and so on. And so they have found that it can reliably depolarize people. For example, they try it with the Real Talk at MIT that talks with people who are pro-Palestinians and people who are pro-Israels. Instead of forcing them to be on the same table, which may not be the best idea, they have conversations in different rooms, in different groups, in different tables, but they meronymously shared the uncommon ground across those different groups so that people can still understand that there are uncommon ground despite the initial differences and so on. So it's also a peacemaking technology. All this is to say that conversation networks does not make demand for people to switch their modalities. Whatever modality that people consider natural should remain that modality. Instead, we're more like an interconnect between the different modalities. And again, before language model, this is much easier said than done. But now it's much easier with the transcription and the synthetic voices and so on and so forth. And in the conversation network paper, we actually warn against the overuse of AI, because you can easily imagine the radical end of this, which is each of us only talk to our chatbots, and then our chatbot deliberate on our behalf and make the decisions. It's like sending your robots to the gym to lift the weights for you. It's very impressive, I'm sure, but there's no muscle that could be grown this way, right? So we need to kind of limit the AI so that we don't go into an avatar state, but there's a lot of things that language models can be used to translate across those modalities so that people do feel fully included, even though that they're not online all the time, or they don't have time to go to physical town halls.
Yeah, so we have time for the final question.
Thank you so much. I'm Ben, I'm a sociologist. I wanted to ask, I think a lot of us here are academics, and we're very invested in the idea of democratic technology and pluralism. But I personally find it difficult to imagine a career where I get to really substantially focus on these problems. And I wonder what your advice might be for how to target a path like this. You know, there's really exciting things like your collaborations with Stanford, your work with Blue Sky, but they seem to exist in different, like very specific and sort of niche locations. And so, what does that look like?
Yeah, in each and every big tech, there is kind of a small unit, exactly as you implied, act like a conscience of that big tech. So within Google, for example, that would be Google Jigsaw or Google.org. Within Meta, that is the community forum folks, community nodes folks, and so on and so forth. And the list goes on. Within Microsoft, there's the Plural Technology Collaboratory, and so on and so forth. So I think I'm really seeing a renaissance of sorts of bringing all those pockets of good together to work on shared larger projects. Rooster Tools is a very good example. It is a new foundation that, as I mentioned, Blue Sky, Roblox, Discord, and so on and so forth, realized that if they all individually want to replicate Microsoft Photo DNA, it's simply not possible. However, if they collectively invest in the shared civic infrastructure in an open fashion, then they can pull together like literally like almost $30 million to start a new foundation like almost immediately. Right, so then you can look for these kind of joint investments into almost more of a capex instead of opex way of building the infrastructure that we need instead of solving the issues on the downstream, the upstream end of us. And so on the Paris Summit, in addition to Roost, there's also current AI and many other endeavors of this kind. And I'm told that toward the end of this year, the India one, the India Summit will launch even more on the kind of open source safety tools and so on. So yeah, my suggestion would just be to be paying attention to these upstream infrastructure projects, and then you don't have to make the kind of difficult choice of getting pulled into the gravity center of big tech just to work on the pocket of good. You can work on the kind of Lagrange point where you feel the same gravity from the different big tech, but not getting pulled into either.
And I think that's a perfect question to end today's session. I'm sure we're all very happy that Audrey has made a stop from her world trip and come to our time zone. So thank you so much for everyone for your very thoughtful questions, and thank you, Audrey, for answering those questions, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.